How do you see that as it relates to DFS? As some people that, people watching this are very serious about the game, taking it very seriously. What's your advice on how to actually improve? What's the DFS equivalent to you of those examples I just talked about of improving yourself and getting better at the game?
Yeah. Constant review of your process, just like we hit on earlier. Like, you have to be going back and reviewing what you're doing. You have to have a reason. So, my day-to-day job, like when I'm hiring staff and training them up, I tell them it takes them a certain amount of time to learn the what. So what are you doing? And then later on, you get this why. The why am I doing what I'm doing? So you have to figure out this part first before this part comes along. And it just takes time. It takes experience, right?
What's up, everyone? Tyler Tamboline here, aka ToeTagginTambo. On this episode of Behind the Mind, talking to my guy Kenny W. Kennyw1732 on DraftKings. Very excited that he hopped on with me here to break down his journey with DFS. I think it's very relatable to most because he's played low stakes right up to now where he plays high stakes, how he got there, his journey. He plays single entry now. He started out, sort of found his path to what works for him. So you guys can check that out as well. And then talks about a lot of the success that he's found and some big ones at that. Fourth at the last year's World Championship for football, where he won $400,000. Second at the MMA live final for $100,000. He made the NASCAR live final, the MLB live final. He just qualified for the NFL live final for 2024 this year. And he also had a second in a Mega Milli last year in NFL for $200,000. So let's talk to Kenny. Let's hop in and go Behind the Mind. All right, guys. So here with my guy, Kenny W1732 on DraftKings. And Kenny, I'm going to bring you right in, man. This is exciting to do, go through, have these interviews and break it all down, find out a little bit about your background, your history, DFS in general, how you approach it, your story, journey, etc. And then maybe some learnings and some lifestyle stuff along the way. But I've been fortunate enough to meet you, some live finals and whatnot. You've had a ton of success playing DFS. Kenny, what's going on, man? How you doing?
What's up, man? Really appreciate you having me on. Super cool to be, one of the first ones on the new show, and really looking forward to getting into it and chopping it up.
Yeah, it should be good. And thank you so much for coming on for the first one, actually, matter of fact. So people that know this out there, it's easy to just have friends that you can hop on with. That makes it a really easy job for me. I love that and appreciate it. But the goal behind it, and obviously the name of Behind the Mind, is, the back of the mind, things that you're thinking, things that you can pass along, not expecting exactly all the secret sauce, secret juices, whatever you might want to call them. But the point would be just a little bit about your history, why you love the game, how you got involved, all that stuff. So we'll start there. Let's kick it off. Everybody wants to know the easy stuff out of the way first. And I will say, before we get into that, I run the old junior high basketball setup on this show here. So the old 2-pass system, you can't just be the ball hog. You can pass on a couple questions along the way if you have it, but one of the house rules that also goes with that is the first question, you can't pass on it. And I just want to know a little bit about your background story. I obviously know a little bit more, but for the viewers out there and everybody watching it in the community, sort of what is your background? Are you playing full-time? Do you work full-time? Tell the people a little bit about yourself, family, anything you're willing to share.
Yeah. So I am full-time. I partner at a CPA firm, and then I'm also a financial advisor. So I've got a couple hats I wear in the real life, side of things. This is honestly just a kind of a side thing that I do for hobby, second job, whatever you want to call it. The way it is right now, it's more of a second job than anything. But just grew up playing ball. When high school ended, I made the decision to not pursue any college athletic opportunities. So it kind of left a void, and I took that up with the gym for several years. And, that kind of surfaced off as you get married and start your own family and everything. So it's kind of picked up with this. And honestly, it's just, I have a hunger to be the best at everything. And that's just kind of that's where DFS has gone now, is just a hunger to play up with the big guys and prove that I can hang, and hopefully make a little money along the way.
Yeah. Well, we'll get to the big boys in a second. Big boys and girls. We'll talk about it. You're up against the biggest of them all. You obviously have moved up to the higher stakes now, and we'll talk about that. It's kind of a good insight, I think, for people to learn of you can get there from, starting small and moving your way up. We'll talk a little bit more, sorry about that. But I was going to say, it's funny because you got the quote unquote real job, like you talk about, where you don't have to have those awkward Thanksgiving dinners where people say, what do you do? And you actually have to explain it. You can just use this as a background noise and they don't have to know anything about it at all. But, I would say, like, how did you first find DFS and when did you get into it? Because it sounds like what you like about it is obviously the competitive spirit. I think that's unknown, but I think it sits well with a lot of people, is that, the outsiders that may not get what we do versus all of us that do it. We have a love for sports. We're probably not playing them as much anymore in some cases, like ourselves, but we want to be involved and we still have that high competitive spirit. So how did you originally find it? Do you remember when it was exactly? Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. So, I mean, it started in our college apartment. We were playing for like $5 a week on football or NASCAR, whatever it was, just because we all sat around on the weekends and watched anyway. So it started at $5 a week, and then, further career and everything goes along, I started playing for $20 a week or $100 a week or a couple $100 a week. And as my career progressed, I started to make more money. Like I said, in my day job, I started being able to jump up into the higher stakes contests. Last year, I was very, very fortunate. Had a couple really big hits that have allowed me to jump up into the high stakes and test my hand at that. So,
yeah. And later on in this interview, we will get to some of the mindset stuff, the difference in the low stakes versus the high stakes, all of that and more. I think that's important for people to know when to jump up, how to handle downswings, what it looks like. When do you change your process? Is it just luck? Is it this? We'll talk about all that and more, but I want to go back. What year was it when you first found it? When you were talking about just like the low stuff, just getting into it from the beginning?
Probably like 2014, 2015.
Okay. So you've been doing it a little while. So the one other question I just had, the storyline of, people always say, I've heard this forever. I've been on record talking about this, is people say, I deposited $100. I ran it up to 10K, never looked back, he's never deposited again. So sort of what's your story when it comes to that? How does it shake out from that point?
Yeah, not that. Started with, like I said, $5-10. But over the course of time, like, there's been a lot of deposits and a lot of withdrawals. Even big hits last year, like, I'm notorious for pulling out a majority of the money. There might be a time where I'm like, oh, okay, well, I put in $5,000, so I'm going to pull $5,000 back out the next week or whatever, just to match it up. But yeah, no, it's been a constant up and down. I was a lifelong loser until last year. So last year set my lifetime ROI up pretty well.
We'll talk about that too. What would you say though, like getting to that point, because I think people sometimes confuse it, like, oh, he just got lucky or whatever. Obviously, you don't have to give your full numbers now. I know you as a friend and we've talked about things offline that you're doing quite well. I mean, you've posted it before a little bit out there. So you're obviously up quite a bit right now over the last year and a half, whatever it might be. But what was sort of the turning point for you? Obviously the intro to the show today, just going through sort of some of the big hits that you've had and sort of things you've been involved in, live finals and whatever. But what was sort of the turning point? And not just the money of it, but also like, was it an aha moment? Was it, you'd been getting so close that it was just waiting for this thing to burst? What would you say it was that sort of turned the corner for you?
Yeah, honestly, and it's a little bit about the money, because it did, like, I was losing along the way. And so I played MMA and NFL both really heavily last year. So it all started with golf way back when, and it's kind of evolved into more NFL and MMA over the last few years. But I was, like I said, down on the year, had a big MMA hit, got it back to even, kind of trickled it back down, hit another big UFC, and that put me up like $17,000. It was towards the end of the year. I'm a CPA. Yeah. I was like, well, I don't really want to pay taxes on that. So I'm just going to roll it all, I'm going to roll it all back in the next day, throw it all on black. So I rolled $17,000 in, and I absolutely crushed. So almost took down the Mega Milli, ended up getting second in that, got my FFWC seat, won a slew of other tournaments. And that just kind of honestly pushed me that direction. So having that extra bankroll, I started playing up in higher contests, and I was like, well, it just seems like there's an edge, right? The way that I play is not super contrarian. Like I don't play a lot of, you know,
You're not really a diamond in the rough guy. Like just to say, if I get this lucky outcome, it's all going to go my way. You play pretty straight up, but I would say your roster construction is the key to what you're doing, right?
Yeah, I was never the Deshaun Jackson guy. So like that's a good example. Like I'm targeting volume, and so just the way that I play like doesn't really lend itself to low stakes high fields, just because I'm not ever going to have that guy that you have to take down these super large field contests. So I just kind of realized, that was my aha moment of, hey, maybe I fit better into these small fields, higher stakes contests, and it's gone well so far.
No, I love that. I think that's kind of a key takeaway. I was going to say, and you found your way around to it and bringing it up to the point for people to out there. It's not just about the high stakes stuff. I think what people don't realize is the large fields versus small fields. If you're not suited for this, it's like sort of what you picked up on. It's like, man, I'm doing a lot of good things, but I can never get these last two pieces. But the last two pieces is because you're always trying to play too much chalk or too many high owned guys or whatever it might be, where you can adapt and say, I could just take that structure and strategy to a smaller field, and it's better probably from a contest selection perspective. It's better for the bankroll, all that, because it's maybe 3 max versus 150, all these other factors. And then that helps you to realize that you can level up on that. And we are going to go into more on that, because like a contest selection, bankroll management, some people may just listen and say, oh, sounds like he just jammed 17K and got lucky, but they don't know. And we'll get to the full story. Is obviously you've been able to sustain it now for a long time over the last year in a lot of different sports and things like that. So maybe first just tell the people a little bit more about the sports you focus on, and then the difference of like the low stakes versus the high stakes with that style of play that you just talked about.
Yeah. So like MMA is a perfect example. So I kind of focus on MMA, NFL, NASCAR. I played baseball for about 2 weeks.
Gave it a shot.
Managed to get my world championship ticket. Went. I got, if there was 200 people, I got 201st there. So gave that one back up. But yeah, it's pretty much just NFL, NASCAR, and MMA now. So basketball's too time consuming for me. Baseball's honestly kind of the same way. Like I'm an all in or all out type of person. So if there's a slate every single day, like I have to play every single day. I've just never been able to pick my spots and only play once a week or whatever. So these the sports that only happen once a week obviously fit that style a little bit better.
I like the weekly sports for that aspect as well. I haven't dabbled as much in MMA. I play it a little bit because we got Titletown, Marley over at Ship It Nation. Obviously something that is helpful. Hoop, my business partner, has done a great job with that. But I would say just in general, I like the weekly sports. And when I was working, coming up, I was working in the auto industry, sales, things like that. The best time for me was 10 p.m. till 1 or 2 a.m. I'm a Nighthawk, just staying up and working on it, listening to content, taking in, reviewing things, going back, doing all this stuff that I could do to get better at the game, and then apply it until to now this point where obviously it's got a lot better of what I want to actually be doing. But those weekly sports were great for it. And NFL and PGA were perfect, and even their seasons offset. So I kind of do it year round as well. So I think that's a key point you brought up as a family man, things like that. That sort of makes life a lot easier. You don't have to play every sport. You don't have to play every day within every sport. But if again, knowing yourself is key. And if that's kind of how you're going to be in or all out, then maybe it's time to be all out on certain sports, and you can use that bankroll and save it for some of the contest selection stuff we'll talk about here now. So with all that said, just going back to it for a second, do you notice any major differences, or what would stand out to you from the smaller stakes? Because again, like we said, people can still apply your thought process of I'm better in smaller fields, but the difference in like a $20 3 max smaller field versus a 3K 3 max with tons of the top players in the world in it that have those bankrolls that can afford to go through those swings. What's the biggest difference that you would say you might notice, or just something in general?
Yeah. And so I think it differs by sport. So like MMA, for example, like you're going to see a lot more people that double dip on a main event, like on a 5-round main event. And a lot of it, like I've caught on, they're doing it according to odds, right? So like if somebody has super high inside the distance odds, they're going to be 70% owned. Like it's just, and so NFL is sort of the same way. It's more of a play the good plays. You know, you and I talked about that when when we first kind of started talking. I was just like, I play the people that make sense to me. And some of it's ownership sensitive, but honestly, up in the higher stakes, like that is the one thing is like ownership. If you're seeing somebody at 20, 30% in lower stakes, like they might be 70, 80% in higher stakes. And it's just, you box each other out and you pick your spots to get different elsewhere. So
I think that can be applied to both too. Like kind of just you may the goal of this show is obviously get ideas from you, and we can get them back to help people out. And I think one thing you said there that made me just think about your process from me knowing you and just talking about from my experience in general is a lot of times people are in the right places on the wrong players, if that makes sense. And the example would be using football, a very common sport that a lot of people play, try and keep it relevant to what's going on right now, is like if you have everybody's on Alvin Kamara for the Saints and for Drake London for the Falcons in that type of game environment back and forth. It's like, can both of them get there? Yes. Does it make sense? Yes. But if they're going to come with 35% and 30% ownership at, especially at wide receiver, that's super high variance. It's like, can you flip it and play Bijan at half the ownership and then play a New Orleans tight end, Taysom Hill or Juwan Johnson or something like that, whoever's in there, and you're able to flip the build, get lower ownership. You're still in the same spot, but guess what? That also got you a bunch more money that you can go spend on maybe a better quarterback or move off one of those value plays that you're not as comfortable with. So it is something that people can take away. You can apply that at any stakes, right? Absolutely. And to be honest, the difference really is ownership. Like you said, at the higher stakes, the ownership on Kamara and London are typically just going to be way higher than what they are in the small. If those are the good plays, they're going to get amped up even more. A lot of people know this, but if not, in the lower stakes, that could be the same case the other way, where now you're getting some of those other guys at even lower ownership, and you're setting yourself up with guaranteed leverage in more ways than one. You're on the right spot, different plays, and at lower ownership. It's really good leverage in tournaments like that. So I think that was a good example.
Honestly, it does make it a little bit easier to, like for me, I use ownership more as a gauge of like where I think I can catch bad chalk. So, it's not always correct. Like this week, I honestly thought AD Mitchell was bad chalk. You've got a $3,500 receiver that ended up being like 70% owned in the Thunderdome. Like to me, that's not going to be my play. I'm looking for someone with guaranteed volume that has, I'm the game log watcher, right? So I want consistent targets. I want good matchups. I want, just guaranteed volume. And to me, that wasn't that. And I thought I could catch the field off guard at, with me fading someone at 70%. Like I said, it doesn't always work, but the process.
It still could have worked too. That's the other thing people don't realize. Like he gets there for his price point, 12 or 13 points. The week that we're recording this is what ended up happening was $3,400 AD Mitchell goes on and gets you 13 points. And obviously that boosts up the rest of your lineup for the ability. It was a very low scoring week, so that helps out. But in general, that's not always going to be the case. And so it is slate by slate, chance by chance, right? You're looking at it from that perspective. So I think that's kind of a key component. It leads into my next question anyway. So this is kind of good. We're flowing here nicely, Kenny. I appreciate you. It's essentially the setup of your style of play. Like you've talked a lot now, people know sort of the sports you play, going from low stakes to high stakes, treading water until your big hit, and then being able to say, okay, now I have the bankroll, not going to go completely crazy. I'm just going to switch up my stakes because I can afford to, and my mindset works better for these stakes. But are you more of do you use a lot of tools? Or do you listen to a lot of content? Are you a quote unquote no ball type of guy? You mentioned the game log watcher. What is your style of play when it comes to that for sort of building out your setup? I know you also, by the way, for those that don't know, and you can tell a little further, but you only really play one lineup per sport.
Yeah. So I play one lineup per sport per week. So, if I have 15 grand invested, I've got 15 grand on one lineup.
We'll save more on that later. Go ahead on the tools content. All right, guys, that's going to do it for this episode of Behind the Mind. As always, if you want the rest of this episode, you can head over to dfsmastermind.com, get into the community, check it out. You get this, all the other interviews, the strategy, process, application videos that myself and other guests record. You get our Q&A roundtable sessions, the case studies where we deep dive on other DFS player pools and strategies and things that we can pull from that, events for different sports coming up that we have like PGA, NFL, where we do roundtables with that and help you learn about a new DFS sport. We'll have other events as well. And of course, the community is all built around community created content, DFS on demand, so to speak. So if you need anything, you can hit me up inside the community or on X at ToeTagginTambo. Thanks for watching.